study session for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, Planning Commission, and the Community Planning Development Committee this evening. We've got a full agenda that we have tonight to go over. We've got a document that's been prepared by our planning director of some 400 pages for study, and we'll delve into some of those pages tonight. I know that everyone's not read every word on every page, but we got the idea of what's being proposed. So tonight, if you would please join me in the pledge to the flag. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, for the record, this is the study session. We have four of our aldermen and mayor present, our city attorney, our city administrator. We also have our planning commission here tonight, and for the planning commission, we have honestly only one stellar member that's here. Hopefully more that will be here. For our Citizens Plan Development Committee, I see three familiar faces there, and welcome to all of you. I'm sorry. I apologize. I think you're over there. So we've got a good group to start with tonight. To start with, I want to, if you look at those of you who have the agenda packet had four different topics that we wanted to review tonight. The topics that we're to review are the proposed sign ordinances and the moratorium and impact fees, and then we wanted to hear from our Community Planning Development Committee. And the first thing that I realized when I started with this was, hey, I want to hear from our Citizens Plan Development Committee first. So with that, I want to turn to them and give you the opportunity to give us an update on where we stand with that committee. Recognize, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm Chuck Dean. I'm chair of the committee, and also with us tonight from the committee is Jerry Henneke, Jamie Moorhead, and Nancy Cheney. We have two of our people who are on business tonight, Elizabeth Bowling and Greg Grissell. The CPDC's task, as stated, is twofold. Our first charge was to make appropriate amendments to the existing comprehensive plan from 2011 to be presented to the Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. Secondly, we were to formulate a long-term plan referred to in the November 14th, 2022 proposal by Alderman Kurt Glick as the 2025 updated Tullahoma Comprehensive Plan. The CPDC began meeting in early January 2023. The first few meetings were primarily organizational in nature. By early June, our group had met 15 times, or an average of 3 times per month. Then, due to assorted vacation and trip schedules, the committee elected to recess until August. We're now well underway again. I would like to point out, half of our committee appointees have professions which require them to travel at any given time, such as this evening. So we've done our best to accommodate their schedules so we can have full participation and membership when possible. In late January, the CPDC began the process to revise and amend the existing 2011 comprehensive plan. Amendments were made to this plan with input from all members, from former planning director Mary Samaniego and from the BOMA liaison, Alderman Blick. As the PC and BOMA are aware, there were several deficiencies in the original 2011 comprehensive plan and area use map, which kept the planning department from assisting property owners who were living in zoning districts which did not allow them to make improvements to their property. As part of our review, revisions to remedy these deficiencies were accomplished through our work with Ms. Samaniego. This process carried into early April and then was presented as the revised 2011 comprehensive plan to both the Planning Commission and BOMA at their respective meetings in April and May. Please note, in addition to or as part of the CPDC addressing our assigned tasks of both the 2011 revised and the long-term 2025 plans, we have been involved in the discussion or review of additional issues. These include, but are not limited to, the zoning revisions of commercial property fence heights, the downtown area indoor recreation spaces, and the sign ordinance. Discussion and action regarding the historic zoning district was addressed and submitted to BOMA, and more recently, our committee has been involved with the discussion of the proposed Summerlin PUD. The CPDC began the review and production process for the 2025 updated Tullahoma Comprehensive Plan in mid-March, overlapping with our work on the 2011 revised comprehensive plan. It was agreed by members of the CPDC to utilize both the revised 2011 comprehensive plan and the city-purchased Think Tullahoma 2040 plan as the primary basis for our review. Our municipal documents, such as, but not limited to, the comprehensive transportation plan, TDOT, technical reports, and the zoning ordinance have been or will be reviewed as part of our ongoing work. I want to emphasize we have taken guidance from former Planning Director Samaniego and are taking guidance from current Interim Planning Director Charles Rush, along with Alderman Glick, throughout this endeavor. Input from Mr. Rush and Alderman Glick continues to be a major part of our process as we formulate the updated 2025 plan. We are taking a methodical approach, which includes a page-by-page review of the Think Tullahoma 2040 plan, along with those areas of the revised 2011 plan which correlate to whatever section we are reviewing in the Think Tullahoma 2040 plan. We started on page 1 of the Think Tullahoma 2040 plan with review and markups and revisions in the background section. Additionally, we have done the same with the existing conditions section. The existing conditions section generated much discussion and took several meetings to review. At the recommendation of Ms. Samaniego, we skipped the public input and planning principles section as she suggested items in this category are better addressed once the heart of the plan is formulated. As the Planning Commission and BOMA know, the plan section of the 2040 plan covers many categories. Our group took some time to discuss what order we should approach these categories for review and revisions. This is because even though they are listed in one order in the plan, the 2040 plan, that is not necessarily the order they should be researched. Once again, in consultation with Ms. Samaniego, it was decided that we would, our best starting point would be the mobility and transportation sections. To begin our review of the mobility and transportation sections, we had one meeting with a virtual tour of the city using primarily the overhead parcel map. Our original plan was to do a driving tour of the city, but due to timing conflicts, we did the virtual tour. We may still proceed with a driving tour at a future meeting. While most people on the committee have a good handle on the roads in Tullahoma, the bird's eye view was helpful as preparation for review of the mobility and transportation sections. In addition to the layout of the roads, this review with Ms. Samaniego also added to our knowledge of what locations in Tullahoma are primarily commercial, industrial, or mixed use. We are currently proceeding with a detailed review of the mobility transportation portions of the two plans. We are including existing projects or projects which are proposed as part of our review for the updated plan. An example of this is the TDOT Local Program Sidewalk Project to add sidewalks to a portion of Cedar Drive between William Northern Boulevard and the Church of Christ at Cedar Lane. As mentioned previously, this review includes the current comprehensive transportation plan and a TDOT technical report, along with the community mobility plan created for the cities of Tullahoma and Manchester. The CPDC is well aware of the city's desire to move forward with putting the updated Tullahoma Comprehensive Plan in place as expeditiously as possible. To that end, we are aiming for spring of 2024 to have things wrapped up. That will be well before the 2025 deadline date, which we were all advised was in place when we took on this role. The CPDC is working diligently for the interest of their citizens and will continue to do so, and we thank you for your patience with the process.
Well, thank you for that report.
You're welcome.
I think it would be very helpful for me and perhaps for all of the people that are participating if we could get a follow-up to that as a hard copy.
Sure.
If you could just email the attendees here the report, that'd be nice for reference.
I will do that.
I heard one date in there that was some interest. That was early 2024.
Well, spring. So you can interpret that how you wish.
We're looking forward to that. Thank you very much for that report. Very good. Anyone have questions for Mr. Dean?
Or any of us.
Just kind of first, thank you all, because I know that this stuff takes a lot of time, right? And it's a lot, and you're volunteering for it, and you also probably catch some criticisms from all over the place. So I think we all know how that can feel sometimes. Everything that we're talking about tonight, really, whether it's moratorium, impact fees, planning, the MUD, all of that is really needs to be based around a comprehensive plan. We do have the 2011 comprehensive plan, right? But we all know that that's garbage. Not garbage. That's a strong word. It's not great. And so the spring of 2024, I know that we had originally set, and this came about because I had asked about, let's get us all in a room and take as many sessions as it takes to get this knocked out, because I don't know that we have the time, right? But 8 months from now, 9 months from now, that's a lot that's happening in between now and then, where we don't have the fundamental guide that we need to do everything that we're talking about tonight. Like, none of this really, we can't base impact fees off of our current 2011 plan because it's just not great, and we know it's going to change. I mean, just none of that. And so I guess my question is, and I'm going to keep asking and kind of pushing and seeing, is what can we do and think about, and I want to see, I'll wait until the mayor, the mayor's request, let's see what you've got, where you're at, and what we've done, is I still think that it benefits us to lock in a room and just get through this. However, if it takes 10 sessions, it takes 10 sessions, 3-hour sessions each, 4-hour sessions, but let's sit down and get it done, because the process is going to be, you're going to take till 2024, then it's got to go to the Planning Commission, and they're going to take their month or 2 months to do it, and then it's got to come to us, and then we're going to take our 2 months, maybe more. If we decide after that third stage that we want some changes, I don't know if we can, I feel like we can probably just go ahead and make the changes and not have to send it back. But if we do decide to send it back to the Planning Commission, then we're getting into winter of 2024, maybe looking at 2025. And so that's where I'm kind of coming, is what can we do to all get on the same page at the same time, so that it's not going through, bouncing around and continuing. And that's kind of where the reason you're here is because I brought that up at a board meeting. And that's what I would like for everybody to think about, is this is so important, and there's a lot resting on this, and our hands are tied on so many different things until this is done. That's more of a comment than a question, but where my headspace is.
That I want to say that I commend the committee for the work you're doing and the progress you're making, and anything that can speed that process up. Sometimes you don't make better sausage by doing it faster.
Right.
It takes a certain amount of time. Appreciate that. But anything we can do to minimize that, the sooner we can get on with some of the very important things, and I know you're aware of that. So thank you for the report. Any other comments for the committee?
Yes. So one of the things that we talked about in several of these trainings is, and I think it would be good for this group to do together, is to set the mission and the goal, and what is it that we're looking to do with this plan, as Mr. Dean just mentioned, that there were parts of it that it was told to him that they should maybe skip that and go to another place until we really knew what the intent and the goal was at the end. So what is the mission, what is the goal? And I would submit to you that that's going to look very different from the CPDC, the Planning Commission, and us. So the first thing that we all need to do collectively is to determine what our collective goal is. For me, personally, and what I'm feeling from the citizens of the city of Tullahoma, is that we do not want this comprehensive plan to essentially be adopted as progressive urbanization for the city of Tullahoma going forward, to triple the population, to bring in more people, just to bring in more people. And I think that I'm pretty well on point with, they want to create a plan that has calculated, mediated growth, that we understand what it is we're getting into when we sign off on it, and that we have the infrastructure in place and are able to support it. And so I think that there's a way for us to come to that conclusion that way as we're chunking this thing together. If we need to say, okay, CPDC, could you have this portion done, submit it to the Planning Commission, then it come to us, let's get that portion out of the way and dispose of it. Now let's go to the next, let's chunk it down, but we cannot chunk it down until we know the collective mission of the plan in itself.
Any other comments for the committee? Kirk?
I too would like to thank the CPDC for all the work they've done. It's pretty tedious, as y'all could imagine, and and I think Ms. Hallmacher's comments are right on point. That maybe tonight, if we're all together, or if we're not prepared to tonight very soon, go ahead and declare that mission and decide what it is and have them work on that if we think it's going to speed the process. But they do have a pretty good methodical process going forward to get the thing done. And I think, some things, and we're talking about a long-range, very long-range plan, some things you just can't rush and throw together when you're speaking of that much time. So I don't think there's any problem maybe with us setting a mission and a goal. I think what you said is pretty good. But I caution on trying to rush it and hurry and just jam it into a few sessions to where we try to hammer something out. But I'm willing to go along with what the board rules.
Any other thoughts regarding the report from the CDPC? Well, I'll reiterate that I think a studied approach to this. I know that you've worked with a goal for getting this done. And I think you're ahead of the track that you set for yourself. So I commend you for that, and I know that you'll hear the board and our goal to expedite it. So thank you for that.
Can we maybe set, I think the updates are good, maybe do like a monthly or like a monthly check-in, whether it's a written report or then maybe if we can put together if we're going to do the mission, if we're going to work on that collaboratively, then we set a deadline for that. It will be done by this date. And then look to the CPDC for, let's get a schedule. This is the plan of attack, this is what we're taking here, this is the date that we're going to have this piece done. I understand that people do have things to do, because we're all in the same position. I know ours is, we're elected and volunteered as well. And so I'm not saying let's rush, I'm not saying, but if we can get some sort of structured attack and approach so that we know what's happening, we can communicate that outward, and then, just here's a schedule, and then a monthly, hey, here's what we've been up to. Even if it's just an email.
Let me ask a question to the committee. Would it be I don't want to take away from the work that you're doing, or to say that you haven't done an adequate job, but would it be possible for you as a committee to articulate your goals and objectives and a schedule that you propose that you could share then with the Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen? I'll ask that to the group.
That's, I like that got a switch somewhere. I think that's a very good idea. One of my thoughts is that we have Kurt, Alderman Glick, that comes to our meetings, and perhaps one way for you all to understand where we are and what we're doing is through maybe Alderman Glick giving a report once a month to you, you know, a 2-page report or something like that.
And just to add to that, if memory serves, I believe the construct you offered, Alderman Glick, was if this happened with you as liaison and it was affirmed by other aldermen, that would be kind of precisely what the liaison role would be yours, and milestones would be published during the Board of Aldermen, Mayor and Alderman meetings. Of course, there's great credence in doing that. Structure is perfect, especially for the work that Charles did. I thought he must have 10 people working for him to put this 350 pages together. It's incredibly thorough and is a wonderful foundation, I think, for dividing and conquering, like you're describing, and then accelerating to give you meat to work on through the next 6-8 months. If I'm not mistaken, Alderman Glick, that's pretty much what you forecast, because the formative stages organizationally required a lot of the foundational things to be established first, and there's been some changes throughout in the committee participants. I'm the new kid. I think Chuck probably has a better answer to what we've heard so far, but as I've watched you all on TV mostly, I've just been so impressed with the structure that has been offered, whether it was Planning Commission or the board or talking to Chuck and others. So if it seems like tonight's a good night to set the mission, goals and objectives, the large, bolder milestones, I think that'll help everybody who's planning their next business trip to see what they can and can't do. And then maybe we'll have, we'll sense real progress before the end of this calendar year.
Then we'll look forward to getting your mission statement, goals and objectives, and schedule come back to the board from committee.
Yeah, I would ask that we have, our next meeting is scheduled for next week, and then 2 weeks after that. So I would ask that we are given at least through the end of October to get that kind of put together for you. I think that's reasonable, since, you know, we've been working in the fashion that we have, which has been to, you know, kind of laboriously, if you will, at times, just go through page by page, and that's still really the best way to do this. Now, we can do our best to speed up the schedule, and believe me, we have talked about it, and we would like to do that. But once again, we don't want to skip anything we don't want to skip. So if we can have a bit of time on that, I would appreciate that, I think, for the committee.
I think that's an acceptable plan.
Okay, so since now it's kind of going back, instead of us doing it all together, which I'm fine with this, but I think that each entity kind of has to consider their role, and then we come together as a board after they submit, and then we kind of collectively put something together about what we think this plan needs to emulate, look like, what are the goals and objectives long-term of such a plan. So the way I look at it is the CPDC is essentially what it is, the citizens portion of that committee. So it would be your goal to bring back to us, what is the citizens' mission in such a plan, the 2025 comprehensive plan? What do the citizens want? And I realize that that seems very similar to what we would want, but I'm going to give you a caveat here in just a second. The Planning Commission, your goal is really to those portions of the plan affecting, and I think that you should do this in conjunction with our senior planner, that affect our planning and codes department and the things that they deal with on a daily basis, and that the city actually has to grant permits and waivers and those types of issues that we need to address in this plan. And then I think, as for us, our mission and our endeavor and our goal as far as a board of mayor and aldermen needs to be looking at this from the perspective of more of a legal perspective of being the supervisory and legislative authority of the city of Tullahoma, and how to make sure that all of our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed as far as the indemnity going forward of our city, and to protect ourselves as far as liability. And so I think that if we break it down and we send each of you to your respective, I hate to say corners, but to think about it from your individual missions and why you're appointed in the seats that you're seated in, I think when we come back together, maybe collaboratively, then we can have a mission that fulfills each goal and each purpose and is a representative of the whole of every entity that is involved and affected.
Thank you all, Mark. Bill, seems like we've given you a chore.
One more thing to say.
Again.
I just want to say that Chuck said that he needed like the month of October to formulate a schedule and stuff. I think that would be doable, and if we did it as a monthly report presented by me, say at the first meeting of each month, then we could have, I could present that plan on the first meeting in November.
Sounds like a plan.
I would just like to add, if there's anything that the city can provide to the committee as far as the way of resources, you please make sure you reach out to us, and we'll do what we can to help you. If it's meeting space, if it's copies, if it's audio visual, whatever it may be, just let us know so we can help you with that.
Thank you. I'd like to just say one quick thing before we close our portion of this here, that we've really have received a lot of help from Charles Rush here, and that he's taking care of us for the most part with that kind of stuff. So, but we'll let you know. Thank you.
Taking on that, there's only one of us in this room that has the background to, coordinate and do this, and that is Charles. And so maybe we spend the next month and a half or 2 months and have Charles be a part of that. Here's the process that we need to follow, and maybe work with the CPDC and communicate with us, and we have a process, but like you said, we did say we were going to put together milestones in those pieces, but we never did. That was on us to do, and we never did that. And so it is unfair. So maybe that is the direction that maybe if we can't vote or not or anything, but have Charles work with the board to, here's the process, here's how we break it down. So we did have a shift in planner and all that. It would take 2 months to do it, but then come back, and then let's all get on that same page. We'll sign off on it, make it official. That's what we stick to. Here's the dates. And then go from there.
And if I may, the meetings that we've had have always had Charles at them, and so he has always been there as either, sharing his voice of what's going on, giving us his expertise, bouncing ideas off of. So that cooperation's been there, and it will continue to be. So.
Very good. I think everybody's on the same page as far as going ahead with the activities of CDPC.
Also, anybody the CPDC meetings are public, they're well advertised, so anybody that wants to attend those meetings in this group or anyone in the public is welcome to attend the meeting, see what's going on, see what they're doing. So
very good.
There's still that tiny hot room.
We can move it to a bigger hot room.
Any other comments from the committee? Thank you. We'll close that portion of our study session tonight and move on into the first, how many pages, Charles? I guess about the first 130 pages of the report you sent to us regarding the sign ordinance. So I'm going to recognize you to tell us about the sign ordinance changes.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. In April, staff proposed a revision to the city zoning ordinance of Article 7 sign regulations to reflect changes in law and what can be relegated. After 3 months, staff was directed to have a joint session with Tullahoma to discuss the alterations needed. This is referring to, of course, the law on June 18th by 2015. The Supreme Court decided the case of Reed versus the town of Gilbert in Arizona, which invalidated the town of Gilbert's sign laws as an unconstitutional restriction on speech. The outcome of the Reed case is that any municipality sign law that regulates signs based on their function, i.e. content, political, garage sale, nonprofit, will be presumed unconstitutional unless the municipality can prove that the regulations further a compelling government interest. The general rule of content-neutral signs is based on messages. If you need to read a sign to know how to regulate it, it's content-based. You can't regulate based on content. Since 2016, the sign code has been revised 5 times. While the main issue for the text is the amendment is to make the regulations content neutral, staff thinks it's appropriate to reevaluate the entire sign code, policy direction, and administration at this time. Proposed changes: number 1, of course, temporary signs are rewritten and simplified to be one type of sign and not several types of content-based signs. Number 2, existing definitions that are not actually regulated in the sign code are proposed to be removed. Relevant definitions that are difficult to understand by the public have been simplified. The sign table has been deleted entirely. You can see the sign table as it currently sits on page 21 of the document. As you can see, this is against the ruling of the town of Gilbert versus Reed. The proposed can be found on page 34. Those are going to be the new temporary signs as adopted. Some questions, of course, from pages 25 to 37. Those include all planning commission's feedback as it was received. The main issues that came up is residential signs up a limited amount of time, freedom of speech versus clutter, and residential on private property, no restrictions. This is a policy decision that has to be made by the board, mayor, aldermen, and planning commission. So I yield back to you.
Very good. For those of you who have had a copy of the document since last Friday, open it up for questions for Charles. Any questions regarding what he's proposing for the change to the sign ordinances?
I have a question. How would this affect, if any, the requirements of gathering a sign permit? Are any of these signs just de facto permissible without a permit? And do we have those laid out versus does every sign in this town need some sort of permit?
We think it would be best as staff to kind of permit all signs, just so it's kind of clear on exactly the direction that's needed. It's kind of unclear. That's why most people, they put up a sign and then it's just like, oh, well, I tell you, you can't do that, I'm sorry. So it's just kind of better defining that.
I guess I would disagree with that, and the reason I bring it up is because if it's a commercial sign, perhaps maybe we have some interest, but if it is a private sign displayed on private property, I'm not sure that we have enough interest in regulating such and doing so. Now, if it's a commercial sign that has electrical wiring, for example, I know that one of the reasons for the permit is to make sure that those signs are safe, and so that makes sense to me. But if it's I'm trying to put letters on the front of my commercial building to advertise my business, I don't know that would require or should require a sign permit. And I think that that is just an unnecessary cost and delay to businesses in this town. So I would like to limit the permitting to those that are absolutely necessary to be inspected for whatever compelling government reasons we have, because I think that's the intent of the ruling in the case that you presented.
Okay, so it's to do with temporary signs. If you allow anything to be on a building, then who's to say that you can't cover your entire building with so much square footage? So that would be why we actually permit those signs, just to kind of make sure it's visually appealing, which we do have the authority to actually regulate by the state.
Visually appealing?
Yes, we do. You can regulate for visually appealing. Yes, you can do that.
I don't care if it's the intent of the state to allow us to do that, and that's why I bring this up. This goes back to the mission. What do we think as the city? I err more on the side of less regulation than more regulation, mainly because of your individual constitutional rights. And I know that if I buy a building and I'm investing in the city of Tullahoma, the last thing I want is the city of Tullahoma telling me what I can and can't do in regards to what color I paint my building, or how big my sign is. You know, if I own Minuteman, for example, how big my sign could be on the side of that, and advertising my business. And, you know, unless there is a compelling government reason, and I don't know that visual appeal is compelling enough to restrict speech. So I want our sign code to be the least restrictive available to further our mission, in other words, whatever that's going to be. And if we're trying to get businesses to come to Tullahoma, then our sign code and things like that need to also be appealing to businesses who want to come to Tullahoma. It goes down to everything like that, because just in starting a business and trying to put a sign out front, we're creating more headache and more fees and more permits than are necessary. People don't want to deal with that.
That's understood. Staff doesn't direct policy, so if that's where Alderman wishes to go with the planning commission, they can do that.
I could get behind that. But if we get behind it here for this, we need to get behind it in all other things, right? So the argument here is, if I buy on my private property, the government shouldn't be able to tell me what color to paint my building. They shouldn't be able to tell me what I can put on that building, but that's also the same argument for if I buy a piece of property, the government shouldn't be able to tell me that I can't put 20 homes on it, right? So I can get behind that if we get behind it. Well, I'm not going to be able to get behind that, because I do believe that in the case of being able to tell you can't put 20 homes, so I can't get behind one and not get behind the other, right? Would be my case on that.
But I think they're different. I think they're very different, both points you brought up. If someone sticks a banner on the side of their building, does it require more fire trucks, more paving, more utilities? But if someone builds 20 homes on a lot, so I think that's two totally different apples and oranges.
To your point, right. But I do agree with, I don't like that we've got to have an inspection and a fee. I think it's probably a waste of staff's time. And if I've got a banner that's going to be up for 10 days, you know, I don't like that we've got to go get a, but I also do understand that that banner could pose a public hazard, right? So if I go slap on an 8-foot banner out there that gets caught by wood or caught by wind, and it doesn't have the structure it needs behind it, it's not pinned down right the way, it doesn't have post work, stakes where it needs to be, it's not secured to it, then that banner blows off, especially if you're on Jackson Street, that banner blows off, gets into a car, that poses a public safety issue. So I think that there is if we do say no, I'm good with saying no. Some things can get through without a permit, but I think that we need to clearly define that, and whether we do that, we can't do it by content, but we could do it by size. We could say, hey, you could put a 6-foot by 2-foot banner out there and not have to get a permit. But here are the requirements for that, right? It needs to be securely staked down. If we happen to get a report that it's not securely staked down, or that blows off into traffic, you're liable for whatever happens. And that's on you.
Now, I think there's a fine line that we have to look at too, and I'm for 100% of free speech rights and property owners' rights, but then also we've got to look at, as our town grows, is what do we want it to look like? What appearance do we want to have? And I don't want to be overly aggressive on establishing those criteria, but we don't just need to let it be the Wild West and to be a free rein to everybody do what they want to do on their property. I think we should have some kind of architectural criteria or design guidelines that we go with that show the look of the town, what we want as we grow, or else it could get out of hand. And I don't think they need to be anything overly burdensome on anybody. But I know, towns like Franklin or other towns like that are very, very strict. And then you go to a town that has nothing. And I think we need to be somewhere kind of in the middle of the road there on that kind of guideline.
Mr. Rush, what, as you and your codes people, what would be your thoughts on having this middle-of-the-road approach to sign permits? Is there a way to accomplish that?
I'm sure there's some go-between there that we can research, and we can kind of work with the Planning Commission and Tullahoma on actually developing that, because that seems more policy-based, so I'm not going to comment on policy here.
Well, that's, I'd look if you for guidance, is the reason I asked the question.
Ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Rush. I have to give you props on that response. I'm not going to comment on policy. I think that is very wise of you and judicious, because you recognize that, you implement and we create the policy. And but I do think that, if it's fine for you to gather research and provide us with resources upon being prompted, obviously, and I think that you answered that absolutely perfect. So I have to give you major props on that. May I say, too, just in consideration, to give you guys another example, we've been doing this often. We grant essentially a permit and a sign waiver every year for certain events, for example. And one being the beginning of October, and they just came last week to ask for an exemption and a permit to put signs in the right-of-way for the Walk of Prayer, I think it's called. And they do that, and they come every year. Same thing with the 41A Festival, the Christmas Parade, all of those. I think that what I'm seeing here is we could streamline that within our sign code to where that redundancy did not have to be perpetual. And if it's something that we approve one time and it's on an annual basis, then we just approve it the one time. Now, if you're going to do it, 20 times a year, that would be different. But if it's an annual, we're not doing the Christmas parade 4 times a year. I think there's a way to do that where once you have sought the permit once for an annual event, you don't need to bring it back to us every year unless you're going to change your signs or the size or whatever. I think that permits for city right-of-way signs, anything in the city right-of-way, I understand maybe requiring a permit of that. But I think that common sense restrictions are also totally appropriate on commercial signs and things like that. But if they are not illuminated and they are not electric, and they're on private property, which means they're not in the city right-of-way, I think that to require every business in town to gather a sign permit and to pay a fee for something that's not even illuminated or using electric is a waste of their time and your time, and it's burdensome to all parties. Nor could we even deny that permit because it would be unconstitutional. So I think that our sign permit has to be guided mainly to restricting only that which is necessary to be restricted. And that's why I say 30 pages, essentially. I would like to set a goal to try to bring that down to maybe 50 pages. And only that which is necessary to be restricted for, whether it be visual purposes, what do we want the town to look like, or what is the least restrictive, least burdensome amount of sign restrictions that the city of Tullahoma has to have to further a compelling government interest.
The 150 pages is a bunch of different ordinances from everybody else's. Ours is actually only
25 through 37 are the pages that are being
Okay.
so
proposed.
it's not actually 100. So he's met that goal.
Ooh, okay.
Already
Good deal. Great.
shrinking it down. I don't think we've helped you at all. You're looking, I don't. Because you're asking us what we want, and we're saying we don't know, basically, kind of. But I do agree, the mayor, my opinion is, and we've had the conversation before, is you have, and this is in general, I'm not saying this is any city staff, right? You are in your position because we think that you are the best possible person to be in that position. Or he thinks so, right? We think he is at this time, and then he thinks you all are. So, there's a difference between coming in here and demanding policy and things like that, right? Versus there's nobody more equipped in this room than you two to give an opinion on policy. In my mind, I'm not a planning person. I don't read sign. I've read our sign ordinance, and I don't understand it, to be honest, most of it. And I think that's why we're rewriting it. So I do agree when the mayor kind of asked, what is your... But you did already give that advice, though. You said at the very beginning, this is what I would do. So that's kind of where I am, is you have given us advice. I feel like this is the second or third time we haven't really given you any advice. I know that we can't vote on anything up here, but you're just going to keep spinning your wheels until we kind of give you that policy direction that you're looking for, is what I'm feeling in the room. I saw you had said something, so
I don't speak as Sir to Charles or the other Charles, affectionately known as Chuck. But what I'm hearing is you've defined this, you've given it context, and I have been watching you for 2 years now, the various presentations of the board and the planning commission. Alderman Comaker used the word commercial a couple times. I think there's a way to get one side of one sheet of paper, a definition of the board and your leadership team's direction. It's commercial and everything else. Is what there's a logic to this and a common sense test that's hard in politics or in public policy to lay out and accept and then go forward on logic and common sense. But if commercial constraints, as we all know, should be the rudiments of the framework going forward, then if you tell Charles and his big team, the framework is commercial, that's where we're going to start. And, for the sake of expedience tonight, since we're all here, is the only reason I raised my hand, then it's not that complex. We already have those examples throughout the town. And because people who live here have consistently said, someone here said already, we love the flavor of Tullahoma, and we don't want it to be Murfreesboro Junior or whatever, Murfreesboro Light, tomorrow anyway. This part of the infrastructure plan for the 2025 plan is vital for steering and advising. And so Charles didn't disagree and said, okay, from here on out, I'm going to talk to Tony and find out where we've run into things that he keeps hearing about. And in the context of commercial signage, straightforward, couple paragraphs. And then, over the course of now until Chuck says this is it, it's spring of '24, whatever it is, those get put together, and we begin there with a direction from you in writing, it's codified, and people submit, they make their appeals, they're given counsel. It seems really straightforward. I'm probably missing about 90% in saying what I'm saying. But I do believe that if you take the pulse of the Tullahoma citizenry, they're going to tell you something very similar to that. Limited government is widely appreciated, and that would be limited government. It orients yourselves to commercial, and then, because, the Supreme Court apparently conflated yard sale signs with what we're talking about. That's not wise, in my view, to put those two categories together. And it wouldn't be wise for us to begin and hope for an expedient, accelerated product based on that broad definition. So, if we can at least divide it in half, commercial and all other, then we're not in violation of this fundamental precept of how municipal governments do what they do, and that he enjoys the clarity.
That I do.
Let's hear from our city attorney.
Something? I think we've learned over time that when it comes to regulations, less is better, because bear in mind that we have to enforce all these regulations that we enact. So I think that we ought to look for simplicity and brevity in the sign ordinance, to clarify the things, to have definitions that ordinary people understand, and let's not over-regulate our town. It's not just the freedom of speech issue that I'm concerned about, it's the fact that we've got to enforce whatever we enact. So let's look at that carefully. There are a lot of different kinds of signs I don't like, and I don't like signs on public rights-of-way and things like that, but that's not for me to decide. Let's just make sure that what we enact, everybody can live with and is reasonable and fair and not complicated, because the Chinese have said they don't need to defeat us militarily. They'll just watch us strangle ourselves with our regulations. So let's not let that happen in Tullahoma.
Wise words.
That's what Khrushchev had, wasn't it? We'll bury you and never fire a shot. No, that's what he said. What I would like to say about the sign ordinance is this. People in this town right now do not understand what is a sign ordinance and what it means. They want to know exactly what are you talking about. I think we need to have a situation here to where you put your signage up here. This is what we have now as a sign ordinance. This is what we want to do to alleviate that problem. So we compare the two. This is what's wrong. Now, this is what we're going to do about it. That way they can look at that, they can relate to it, and see what's going to happen. Right now, if they read this, they have no idea what's going on.
Since this is a study session and not a board meeting, I want to share with you guys 3 instances where I've had complaints about our sign ordinance. Number 1, there was an issue with, over by the bowling alley, there's a new U-Haul rental center that they just opened last year, I believe. And they had to get a sign permit, obviously, to display for the U-Haul. And they called me so upset because they could not estimate the size of the side of their building. And our codes person, whoever they talked to, told them that no, they literally had to get a ladder, get up there and measure it, and it had to be on the dot. And I'm like, first of all, it's a safety issue. And second of all, why would they need to know on the dot? I mean, I think that if it's an estimate and it's generally even close, we're doing a permit and somebody's going to have to inspect it anyways. I mean, some of that just didn't make any sense. And they denied the side permit because it was an estimation and made them reapply. They were so mad, buddy. And I could understand. And so that seemed to be a little more regulatory. We have to remember we're in the business of customer service. So where we might have a regulation and somebody can't comply, then we need to help them figure out how to, do something feasible and bring it into compliance or whatnot without burdening them into oblivion. The second example I'll give, and it's probably not my example to give, but he may not. Hopefully you wouldn't care. I believe that Mr. Mann here, before he was on the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, also brought to me, when he was a citizen and I was an alderman, an issue with a complaint about a temporary sign, essentially a banner on the side of his building that someone had called and complained about. That literally it was nothing. It just said, hey, minimum press. And it was not illuminated. It was not a safety hazard. It was not a risk of any sort. But he was, threatened to be fined if he did not remove the banner. And I thought that was absolutely just ridiculous and preposterous. And then the third example I will give you, which has become an eyesore, and this is a personal, I don't technically own it, but I will one day probably when it's passed down to me. The buildings right down here on West Lincoln, we have a discount flooring store, many of you know, right there on the right. And there is a non-conforming, I'm going to say non-conforming, it's a pole. These properties have never actually changed ownership, but by my grandfather dying and it passing to my dad. But there's a non-conforming pole, and there's a perfect place to put a sign that they could make look really nice right there for that building, and the tenants in behind it, and it would look really good. But the city would not allow us to use that because when the road was widened, now where that pole is, it technically is in the city right-of-way. And it at one point wasn't in the city right-of-way. At one point was on our property, but when the right-of-way was extended, it now is non-conforming and cannot be used. So it is essentially an eyesore, but there's really no reason that we couldn't create the code where those things are so expensive. Why would you move it and why would you make it replaced when it's literally not hurting anybody or anything and you can use it? So I think that common sense sign regulations have to come to fruition here, and I'm giving you these examples because these are real life, real world examples here in the city of Tullahoma that we see issues with redundantly, and we need our sign code to reflect whether we can have our city administrator create a waiver without it coming to the board or whatnot, to where we can take care of some of these issues and be in the business of customer service.
So, since it got brought up,
Sorry.
Your name is called, you're recognized.
right, the issue I had wasn't so much with, and I broke the rules, right? I didn't get a temporary sign permit. And my problem was that there were, and I drove around and counted, at least 77 other temporary signs around town, of which most of them had not gotten a permit either. But I was chosen to be fined and be told to take mine down. The selective enforcement, and I get it, you guys can't drive around all day enforcing just temporary signs. I mean, that would take a lot of y'all's time. So it's the selective enforcement part. That's what I feel like we need to look at this through that lens and see what we can do to make this fair for everybody. So the rules apply for everybody, and if it's something that we cannot enforce, like Mr. Worsham was saying, maybe it's not something we need to be doing.
Mr. Rush, let me ask a question. You've spent a fair amount of time looking at the provisions of our sign ordinance. and put together what's in front of us today. With that, are there the components of that sign ordinance that would be unusually burdensome to enforce?
I'm going to let Tony actually answer that question.
Thank you, Tony Mercado, Property Maintenance Inspector. The problem with the enforcement of this is I am the only person that does any enforcement for any of the city ordinances. So as Mr. Mann said, it is selective enforcement. Unfortunately, he received a complaint, therefore I was obligated to follow up on it. It's no different than catching a speeder on the interstate. You can only catch as many as you can catch and get to. So that's my concern. If you want to put on 10 more guys that do what I do, fantastic. I could definitely use the help.
I think what this board is looking, we're not looking to add more sign inspectors in town. We're looking to create an environment in our city that allows us to have a city that's not overrun with signs everywhere that are unregulated. Now, there's got to be somewhere there's got to be a happy medium, if you will, between unregulated and what are we going to regulate. And that's what, if it takes 10 more sign inspectors, I'm not for the sign ordinance. If you can enforce the sign ordinance that's been proposed, I can adopt that. So I don't know where we are with this as far as how egregious is this sign ordinance that's being proposed? How impractical is it? That's the question.
I think it depends on the overall vision that we want for the city, and I believe Mr. Henneke hit on it, that we're dealing with a couple different issues. We have commercial versus residential, so they have different guidelines as to what you're looking for as an ultimate outcome. I am for sign regulations to an extent. I don't think we should overburden people. The examples that Ms. Allmacher gave, I believe there was some exaggeration possibly on the person that made those statements to her. But at the same time, I know that our office works diligently to try and work with people, and we try to make it as simple as possible. Sign permit fees are actually very nominal. It is usually a very simple process, unless you're doing some large billboard or something of that nature.
Well, I think if you sent this sign ordinance to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for approval, they would have a hard time passing.
But I think that's the crux of what we're here for, though, is we've known, and I'm not trying to, please don't take this way. We've known for 2.5 months now that we were going to have a meeting on the existing sign ordinance. Everybody in this room has known that. Planning Commission, because I think I put it on.
Yes, you did.
So we've all known, and I know that we didn't get our packets until Friday, right? But we all have the ability to go to Tullahoma tn.gov and pull it up. And again, I'm not trying to, but I don't want to say I understand because I don't know that you are, but there's got to be some frustration because my understanding of what we're here is these things that we're saying, if we brought this to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, that we would deny it. Well, that's the whole reason we're here tonight, is to give them the feedback and tell them what to prepare to bring to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen so that we pass it. And we say, I've heard it said, we're the policy people. Well, and we don't want staff writing policy. Well, then we need to write that policy. in what we're not doing. You know, some of the things that, and I'm not picking, please don't take it that way. I've heard, you know, we need common sense sign regulations. Well, what is that? If we're the policymakers, then let's define that and let's give that to him so that he can prepare something to give to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen that we're going to pass. So that would be my, I don't mind meetings. I don't mind them. And I'd sit here till 1 o'clock in the morning if we need to. But I feel like he's going to walk away tonight and still have no idea what it is that we want. And we're going to be in the same predicament where they're going to bring something, the Planning Commission needs to chime in too, because it's coming to you guys. So they're going to bring something to the Planning Commission, it may or may not pass there, then it's going to come back to the BOMA, and we're going to say, nah, we don't like this. Well, it's our fault. So that's the only thing that I would say is, let's give the man something.
Okay. Would everybody turn in their packet to page 127? Thanks to Mr. Rush, there's some good guidance in here based on that lawsuit, and I think this is where we can start giving out some of that guidance. If you look, it says, after dealing a huge blow to sign codes throughout the country, the court did offer guidance on regulations that are not content-based. Following is a non-exclusive list of sign regulations that are not content-based and therefore presumed constitutional, along with examples of such regulations adopted by Dutchess County communities. So obviously we have regulations in here for the size of signs. And this is where I would go with this, the size of signs. Mr. Rush, do you know of anybody that has ultimately complained about, or Mr. Mercado, about not being able to put or to place a sign because of the size of our signs?
Yes, that's pretty common.
Okay, so I think that that would be information that we would need to know. So I would want to know what kind of complaints we have had based on permits or citations on the size of our signs. So we can look if this is something that's happening, or if it's once in a blue moon, or if it's something that our citizens are regularly getting cited for or complaining about. Number two, the lighting of signs. I noticed that we do have some regulations for lighting of signs. I think that lighting of signs, any sign that has to be illuminated or connected to an electrical source, probably should have to be permitted. I think that is reasonable. And I think that can remain. But if there are other regulations that are necessary to that lighting of signs, or citations or complaints that we have had in regards to that, I think it would be privy for this board to know as we are revising this ordinance. Same thing with electronic message display. We are starting to see an uptick of those in our community. Is this something that we want to regulate further, or is this something that we want, and when I finish, you guys can weigh in on that, do we want to cap how many of those can be in town? I noticed that you can't have those on subdivision or residential developments. We can't even have illuminated or electronic messaging signs on the new subdivisions or the PUD that's being brought in. Is that too regulatory, in other words, to say that there are vacancies available, in an illuminated sign? The placement of signs, that's something that, we've been talking about. Obviously, anything that has to go in the right-of-way probably needs to have a permit, unless, I was saying earlier, if it's a redundant, reoccurring event every year, that we waive the permit fee and the signs. I think that we could just get a list of those and approve them all in one fell swoop. I don't see why they have to be continually brought back to the board. But I think looking at all of this, and I won't continue going down the list, but looking at this guidance right here, this is a starting point for what our vision is and our purpose in this in this sign ordinance, and to what extent we can regulate and still be within the constitutional confines. Mr. Mercado, I would say that your statement alone, that yes, it has been selective enforcement out of bare necessity, should tell us that this sign ordinance is not working for us. And we are going to have to, unless, like the mayor said, increase the number of people on staff to regulate and to, issue citations, then we need to bring it back to where one man can handle this. And if one man's going to do this job, then this sign ordinance better be bare minimum only to that which is necessary and compelling. And right now, I don't think we're even anywhere close to that, even with the decrease in it. Because one guy can't go around and issue, every citation for, or what it comes down to is only when somebody submits a complaint are we then going out. And so then it becomes, well, I know how to get my neighbor, or I know how to get that person I don't politically align with. It's arbitrary. And we have to stop doing that and using the city, and our resources to exact political revenge.
Do you have what you need? Be honest. Do you have what you need from us?
Yes, I'll be able to draft that. However, I would like at least some kind of comment from the planning commission, knowing that this would go through, or what kind of feedback you guys have for this. Because it's going to depend on y'all as well, because the only people that can actually change this is the planning commission, so.
I think the planning commission, we went through it page by page, and paragraph by paragraph.
It's just whatever you come up with from...
Well, I think that's, because I was on the planning commission at the time, and that's what, we went through it page by page, paragraph by paragraph, and all those notes are in here. And at the end of that, we decided, well, let's get BOMA involved so we don't go through this entire process and then it just gets kicked back. And that's why we're here tonight, because that's not my worst fear, but that's not what I want to do, is have him, there is a ton of research in here, and a lot of time has been spent, and we've been working on this for 2.5, 3 months, and that's just way too, I know that sometimes rushing the sausage makes bad sausage, but also sometimes taking too long to make that sausage, your meat goes bad. So that's kind of where I'm at here. Let's make sure the guy's got what he needs. The planning commission has what they need, so that the next time this comes back to us, we're not sitting here having the same conversation and we're kicking it back and we're going through this whole 3-month process again.
Part of the issue, I think, is if we all got together whenever we knew that we needed to, let's say we have a goal, we need to update this ordinance, we probably should have had a study session before everybody started to do all the work to get direction on where we're headed. And I think that if we all could have easily said, none of us, I agree with what Alderman Berry said. Y'all are the experts. We have faith in y'all. I think that, we're the elected officials who, we answer to the citizens. And so if we would have had this conversation, I think, on the front end, and we could say there has to be a happy medium where we don't want to overregulate, then that would have made, then you could have focused on how can we simplify this, we may have been doing this backwards.
I think that's what this step is.
Right.
This is that step of...
But I think that you're getting some good feedback.
I would say just look back at those citations and the complaints that we get coming in on a regular basis, and I think that's going to tell you where to start. And, is this redundant, and is it a safety issue? Is it a compelling reason to justify a regulation? And if it is, we need it. You see what I'm saying? If it had merit. If it didn't have merit and was really a waste of everybody's time, let's scrap the regulation. So I think a good place to start is just go back through the citations and the complaints.
Recognize City Administrator.
Charles, my question would be, do you feel like you have a good vibe from the board on what they're looking for as far as the common sense sign regulation? And then number 2, how soon could you get that back to them?
To answer your first question, yes, I do. I have some direction. Second question, one-man department. So a lot of work. Hopefully, maybe sometime in December, I can get it back to you guys. It'd be about the fast, just with day-to-day operations and everything else. And then with the community planning, got a lot on my table, but I can probably get back to you guys in December.
I think the first of the year is appropriate.
Does that go to the planning commission first?
Yes, I will go to the planning commission.
And we've only got one meeting in November, one in December.
Yeah, that's why I say the first of the year is appropriate.
I'd like to make one other comment for consideration, and that was based on what you went through here, and some of the things were really good ideas, I thought. And what Jerry was saying about the commercial and all other, I think that's a good direction, but then also we could look at different corridors. And it says that in here in one of these things, to where there could be different regulations for, say, Jackson Street, as there would be more of a residential area, whether the signs are lighted or how bright they could be or whatever. That's something to consider too. I know, and it suggests that in here. So.
Very good. Mr. Russ, having gotten the answer that you just gave to the city administrator, we're going to close this section on the sign ordinances. And thank you for the work that you've done putting this together, and thank you in advance for the work that you're going to be doing.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, can we first commend Mr. Mann for his research? 77 other temporary banners. That is amazing.
He was on a mission.
I don't know how long that took you. May I just offer one last item as well? For large structured challenges like this, have you done, this may be too business 101, but this group does brainstorming. Some scribes over there with a giant whiteboard capturing everything they can. They give it back to you, the 100 things you said. Nobody critiques anybody, and gives you 75 votes to reduce, numbered voting, to reduce that 100 to something more manageable, reduce it again, reduce it again. That's kind of what I thought we were going to do tonight. I wasn't sure how big a bite we were going to take, but to help us frame these parts in appropriate context so that we can think we got something done, something constructive was accomplished. I think, the permanent, temporary, residential, commercial, nice quadrant to start with, but that's just my 2 cents. But if you haven't done numbered voting after brainstorming, for these massive projects, any good facilitator can stand over there or behind me and listen to you speak one by one. Steve, next, and go around the room until there's no more ideas. And then they close that out, you take a break and get a coffee or your favorite adult beverage, and then they give it back to you for your consumption and reduction in a structured way. And then, you actually have an actionable list. I would defer to Mr. Quick, for the development of that idea. But because this is so large, and because it's precedent setting, we're starting from scratch. It's been revised 5 times since 2016, because good intentions, great people, trying hard, but not conclusive, not clear enough for public consumption and understanding. So I understand your goal to be satisfaction, customer support for our personal, applications as citizens as well. That would be just an option. I don't know how anyone else feels, and I don't speak for the committee or for Charles.
Also, is there not any, so you've kind of gotten some feedback from us, is there not any reason why Mr. Rush, that you couldn't, once you all have, the Planning Commission have discussed what edits or whatever you want to make, that we couldn't all get back together, or that you could present that to us before you...
Hey, here's what you guys asked, did I get this correct? Maybe you consolidate it down, and based on this, this is the result of that. Now, if you don't like the result, then let's go back up to the drawing board
Yeah, we can do that in a study session. I think that'd be a good idea.
I mean, that way it doesn't go through all this to come back to us to vote it down or something crazy. I mean, we could just keep chipping away at it, I feel like.
Very good. And again, thank you for the work you've done on this and the work that you and the planning commission will be doing, not just you and the planning commission and CDPC will be doing as well. With that, we're going to move into another session. We're going to enter into the municipal moratorium on building permits and the major preliminary plats in Tennessee required legal and administrative process. Moratoriums are temporary suspensions on restrictions on building issues and permits and major primary plats, often put in place to slow municipalities' time to review and potentially update zoning and land regulations. And with that, we don't have 130 pages, but we have a significant number of pages relating to how one might address moratoriums. And if there's anything that you read in this that was, I hope, stuck with everyone, that is how important it is to, in considering a moratorium, how important it is to define explicitly what it is you're addressing in the moratorium and a plan to administer the moratorium. So with that, Mr. Rush, I'll let you open the comments.
Thank you, Mayor, appreciate it. Staff was directed per the BOMA meeting on 8/28 to schedule a joint study session with the BOMA and Planning Commission to discuss the subject of a moratorium for Tullahoma. The meeting date was set for 9/20, but was moved to October the 2nd by the BOMA on 9/11. Establishing a municipal moratorium on building permits and/or major preliminary plats in Tennessee requires a legal and administrative process. Moratoriums are temporary suspensions or restrictions on issuing building permits and/or major preliminary plats, often put in place to allow municipal time to review and potentially update its zoning or land use regulations. Common reasons include updating zoning codes, conducting comprehensive planning, addressing infrastructure concerns, or responding to sudden development pressure. On page 137, data has been compiled for 2023 of preliminary and final plats for Shelbyville, Manchester, and Tullahoma. Shelbyville has had 197 preliminary and final plats. Asterisk to this is, of course, the 1,500 global homes has already been approved. Manchester has had 409 so far this year, and Tullahoma has had 229, of course, outlining the planned mixed use that is proposed from the Board of Mayor Aldermen of 996 units. This is the policy decision that was by Alderman Wilson, Alderman Berry, Alderman Allmacher, and Alderman Glick. So staff looks to you for the policy that you wish to put in front of us.
Very good. With that, open the floor for comments on the moratorium content that we reviewed with these boards. We saw what other cities are doing, and so open it up for discussion.
I have one quick question for you. This sample ordinance, and I don't want you to give away your secrets, but was this a ChatGPT?
It was.
It's the markdown.
Yes, it was.
Good use.
It actually came back right because I have one, what is it, from...
It's a great tool.
What is it? Yeah, no, yeah, what is it? Nolensville moratorium, and it's the exact same way, so might as well use the tools you're given.
Well, a lot of the examples that were presented were from anywhere from England to Japan to San Francisco, so I don't know how much applies to Tullahoma. So the first question to the board is, the comment is, do we need a moratorium today on any future development that we have in sight.
Well, whenever I look at, even in the, this part that identify the need, common reasons are updating zoning codes, conducting comprehensive planning, addressing infrastructure concerns, or responding to sudden development pressures. I think that we hit every single one of those. I mean, we're in the middle of trying to revise our comprehensive plan. I think that there are definitely infrastructure concerns in the city, and with the amount things coming that we've already passed, and with the other things that's coming, the PUD and whatnot, I think that we, that's kind of cause for concern. Not even just my concern, my biggest concern, and what I get the most from the citizenry, is that, is this going to raise our taxes? And we have to kind of also consider that Manchester is expanding rapidly as well. We're going to, the mega sites coming, there's, all of us here in the city are paying county taxes too. So what happens when our city taxes double and our county taxes double? I can't live here. And I know a lot of people that are in the same boat. So I think that, I look to you, Mr. Rush, for guidance, because, it's just, I think that we need a moment to pause and to know that we're getting this right. We're in the middle of, doing our comprehensive plan, and we haven't even finished with that yet. So those are my thoughts.
George, did you want to address that?
Oh, yes, I'm going to address that. I believe we're doing pretty well right now. The TIF will pay for itself with all the infrastructure and everything else if it's approved, of course, by the Boma and the county. Our roads are in good condition. We haven't really grown. What is it? We're growing at 0.8 of 1% over, 2010 till 2020. So we've been growing by 1%. Right now, if you look at the American Community Survey ACS data over a 5-year gap, right, we're growing at 1.37% right now. They estimate that until about 2030. So we're not growing anywhere near the amount of everything else around us. To even talk about impact fees or moratorium, people are growing anywhere from 15 to 20%. We're over a 9% gap in 5 years. We haven't even touched that. So could we talk about this in the future of actually updating some stuff? Yes. Is it needed right now? Staff does not believe so.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Cheney.
I have a question about the, where it says on page 137, about under Tullahoma, it says, has a star pending the PUD along North Jackson. And I'm not certain, does the public understand whether that has been approved, actually been approved to come in?
That hasn't been approved yet. That will be in front of the board, Mayor, Aldermen, and an ordinance next Monday, and then, what is it, the fourth Monday in October.
Okay. So how would a moratorium affect the PUD? Would that prevent the PUD from coming in? No, it would not prevent.
Well, it depends on if we limited building permits, technically.
Correct.
So what I would say about this is, Ms. Cheney, you do bring up an excellent point. The 996 units, you would need to add that in to Tullahoma's. So that would make us at, y'all do the math for me, 996 plus 229. So now look at those numbers up top. We are now over 1,100, which is over double Manchester and over 5 times Shelbyville.
Yeah, but then Manchester and Shelby would have to add in their projected as well, so that's not apples.
Well, it's not projected anymore since it's already...
It's still projected because we hadn't passed it.
The PUD?
Yeah, it hasn't passed. It hasn't come to the board yet.
Well, I mean, it's already been passed to the planning commission.
But that is, what you're seeing there from Manchester, stop me if I'm wrong, that's what they've already done. That doesn't count.
Correct. So this is what they've passed so far this year, is the 197 for Shelbyville, the Manchester 409, and the 229 for Tullahoma. Global Homes has actually already been in front of the Shelbyville Planning Commission, starting in 2021, as my research indicates.
Mr. Dean, you had a comment? Yeah, if I may, just to add to the conversation of numbers. So we have the 229 from this year, not counting the PUD, for plats, or excuse me, I guess it wouldn't be plats, it would be lots which total up from the plats. That's for just this year. I did a little research and went back through the Planning Commission agendas through 2020, which is what's available on the Tullahoma, Tennessee government website. And by my count, and this includes some UGB areas, and that would be including this figure of 229 from this year, there are approximately 730 allotted areas from plats since 2020 that have been approved. And I did a Mr. Man, and I drove around to all these places. 63 houses have been built on these. So then that may take into account some plats that are off the table now or whatever. I know there's one that's, I think it's 100, there's one plat that got pulled, but the point being is there are several lots out there in excess of 500 or 600 that have not even been built yet. Now, there's several of them that look like they're underway, but the homes aren't on them yet. So Charles might be able to update that, but the point is there's a lot of lots that have been approved or in the offing to be approved with the PUD. Nothing's on them yet.
Yeah, so that's the 730 plus it would be then the 996.
I would like to respond to that. I left that off because a preliminary plat's only good for 1 year. So if that was actually going to come before, or someone was wanting to do work, it'd have to come back before the Planning Commission. So anything over a year is no longer approved.
But I have one more question. So this number also, this only accounts for things that have come before the Planning Commission. This doesn't account for building permits for homes that did not require, I mean, when I got a building permit, I didn't have to come before the Planning Commission. So there are a multitude of building permits issued for new constructions that are not required to come before the Planning Commission.
I left off minor plats because I did not think that would be under the table of actually telling someone what they can do with their 5-acre tract if they want their son to actually divide that. So that's why that was left off. If you wish that data, I can most definitely provide it.
Oh, I mean, I'm not saying that we would. I'm just saying that this isn't, I don't want anybody thinking this is an accurate reflection of how many homes have been built or have been approved to be built.
I understand from previous information that I've obtained that 39 houses have been begun construction in Tullahoma this year, 39.
Yeah, and that's what I mean, we've actually permitted this year, there's 30.
Which is kind of...
So in 10 years, that's 390 houses. That's not much growth.
The county released some data, and they took Coffee County, Manchester, and Tullahoma, and this is last year, year over year, on real property value increase, right? This is the tax money coming in. Manchester, what to get the exact numbers, Manchester's like 4.5%. This is on their tax books, right? For like a 4.5% increase in their real property taxes. The county was like 3, 5, 6, right around there. Tullahoma was 1.6. So when the question comes up of, is this going to increase my taxes? What is going to increase taxes is if we continue down the path that we are. Because if you have 200 homes, let's just keep that math simple, but you have $2 million worth of things to pay for, then that distribution stays the same. Well, that cost year over year continues to increase because we're like every other business out there. Our personnel costs increase. The cost for us for fuel increases. All the inflation hits the city of Tullahoma the same way it hits everybody else. And if you're not increasing, now I think that there are, and this will get into that impact study thing that we've talked about, there are some things that are bad bets, right? Sometimes maybe that two-home townhome, and that's where I want to look at fiscal impacts on this lot. Maybe that's not good for us, because maybe that does have a negative fiscal impact on the overall population. A single home on a 5-acre lot, that is going to cost taxpayers more money than putting 3 homes on that 5-acre lot. And so those are things that we do need to consider, and why it is important to do, and it's in this next thing, some of these impact studies. As far as moratorium, is a suggestion that we wait until 2024, until that comprehensive plan is done?
I have to play devil's advocate with some of what you just said. So, if you increase the number too significantly in too short of period,
But you don't do that.
Well, hang on. So the premise behind what you're saying is, the same 200 people are paying for the services that are continued to increase. But here's the problem. Many times, if you're just increasing the number of homes, houses, apartments, whatnot, it doesn't necessarily you're increasing your tax base comparatively. Because if they're renters, you're not necessarily just, creating a lot more money as far as your property tax increase. But what you are doing is you are creating more people to have to provide services for, like schools, fire,
And that's my question.
roads, et cetera.
Where are the fire halls that we're going to have to build? Where are the schools coming from? Where are those things coming from?
I don't think you go willy-nilly, and that's the conversation that we spent an hour and a half on a couple of occasions. I think a moratorium is, I agree to this because I think it's important to have a discussion, but I think it's a hammer, where a better approach is kind of what, you don't go willy-nilly and you don't want to grow unchecked, but we don't know. If I asked, I don't know what the cost of 1,000 square foot residential home in the city of Tullahoma is and what that tax burden is. That's the stuff that we need to be figuring out. We should know on an R1, this is what this costs in this area of town. In an R1 in this area of town, this is what it costs. This is what it costs for a duplex on this side of the land. And that's where you do these fiscal impact analysis when a development, I know people are going to hate that, but when something comes in, you have a fiscal impact analysis that's done, because we've had an economist, not yet, but that's something we do. We have an economist come in and tell us what the cost of these things are. And then instead of basing it off of, because you're right, you can't just base it off of, oh, it's 2 homes, it's this acreage. But if we can put a price to it and we can put a cost to it, then we're making decisions based off of actual fiscal data versus, we don't need 20 more homes. Maybe we do. Maybe we do need 20 of these types of homes. Maybe we need 10 of this type of home. But we can't make any of those calls until we've had some sort of fiscal assessment done.
You arguing for or against a moratorium? Because
I'm not arguing for a moratorium, but I'm arguing that we speed an economic analysis.
I think you made a great point about the fiscal analysis and all that, but, and I'm not sure where I stand on a moratorium, but I think what you're saying is almost pushing you toward, that is why a moratorium would be needed, is to be able to get that economic data in where we could make an educated assumption on the growth. And without going crazy and growing too fast, and then we find out we did the wrong thing, so.
And that was my point, is that I think, that the planning commission, as long as that they're just making decisions based on, well, did they meet the minimum requirements? That's not gonna, that may have gotten us through till now, but that's not gonna, when we're starting to talk about this amount of growth, that's not gonna cut it anymore. we're going to have real data when how much is going to, if we're getting 1,000 units, that's not even accounting for the children. There's probably going to be way more than 1,000 children. And do we have the funds for the schools? Do we have the funds for not just the upkeep in our normal roads that we currently have? Are we going to upkeep the new roads, the fire halls? Even for this one development, we're going to have a fire station or maybe two. And, you know, those are my questions. So we can't continue. I thought that this is a good way to go, the moratorium, because we can't keep just making decisions based on did it meet the bare minimum requirements, and that's why that I thought that we all needed to kind of be on the same page about that, because as long as we keep just putting things through based on the minimum requirements, we're all going to be unable to afford the homes that we're currently living in, because this is currently happening in Manchester, in the county, and it's getting ready to happen here.
So in conversations that I've had with Sue Wilson, we've talked with Butch quite a bit, I've spoken with all of our department heads, we realize that you need to make data-informed decisions. I know, as Alderman Berry has referred, we've had several conversations that really talks about making sure that we can drill down and provide you with that data. One of the things that I would ask you is to go ahead and begin telling us what data you want first, if that makes sense. We have a plan that we're going to be able to provide that data to you in relatively short fashion. You know, by the end of the year, hopefully we can start providing you with some real actual data that could drive some of your decisions.
Yeah, I have a couple of things to add to it. So going back to that mission and goal, so one of the reasons why Tullahoma is not going to show as much growth as some of the other areas is because we didn't have, to begin with, the beginning of this year, or past few years, farmland to the extent that was not developed like the city of Manchester and other cities did. Most of our land, good majority of it, has already been developed, which would mean that our city, unless we're annexing property in droves, our growth should be slower, much slower than other rates, considering the available land that we have to develop. And with the state's push to conserve, some of that land, because of the issues that we're seeing infrastructure-wise, they are discouraging what other people would call sprawl. They're kind of going the opposite direction. So you want to preserve your 5-acre tracts. You want to, actually we're seeing that has a negative.
That's not what the state's saying. The state's saying is preserve your agricultural land. They didn't say preserve your big 5-acre tracts. They said preserve your farm.
Actually, they said, I'm going to correct you, they said not just your farms, but define a farm. So we said small to large. They're not setting a cap on it, but what we don't want, there's this big push with progressive urbanization against sprawl, meaning, there should be 10 houses on 5 acres, not one. And I don't feel like the city of Tullahoma, going back to that base mission, that the city of Tullahoma wants that. We want to preserve some of those larger tracts, 1-acre lots, 5-acre lots, whatnot, and I think we need to determine where those need to be concentrated, if you will. And so with that, considering our landlockedness and in relation to other cities, let's define the term growth. What is growth? And let's determine what a reasonable amount of growth is. Is it number of people? Is it number of homes? Is it available land that has not been developed? What is the appropriate amount of available development land? We don't want to grow it all at one time. We don't know what we might be missing out on in the future if we do that, or what the needs are for the future. And I'd like to go back and remind everybody that a few years ago, when we decided to spend $10 million in Fair Elementary, not that we probably had to, but I was saying this 2-3 years ago, hey, the growth is going to happen at the north end of Tullahoma, and rather than building this $10 million elementary school, we might ought to start thinking your next fire department and your next school is going on the north end. This was pre this PUD, this was pre everything that happened a few years ago. And so I think that, again, looking at our comprehensive plan, what is our mission, what is our goal, let's define what growth is and what a reasonable amount of growth is in that plan, so that we can determine what our land needs to look like.
That's why it's important for us to do that comprehensive plan, and putting it out a year from now, we can't answer these questions.
It is, it's important, but in the meantime, my issue is that there's a lot of stuff, this is just what's on paper in front of us. You know, what's right here, plus the 996 units, the 730 that Mr. Dean mentioned, those could potentially, even if it has expired, maybe they got held up doing something and they're going to come back and resubmit those. I mean, we have no idea. They were once, and it would be interesting to know, out of those, how many of those did we rezone these properties, because and that was my issue with the 2040 plan, is that all of the place types on there was going to blanket rezone the whole city. It was going to do it, and once the zoning has been removed from agriculture to whatever that place type was, then it would never have to come back to the BOMA again.
With it.
And so, because all of that's just then decided by the Planning Commission. So, these are just things that are black and white right in front of our eyes, and as long as that we have the mindset that we're just passing things based on whether or not that it meets the bare minimum, then I think that I feel like that there's trouble brewing, that we're not going to have the money to pay for, we're all going to see a tax increase. I don't see how it's not possible.
Mr. Worship? Yes, this is not a legal issue at all, but I do want to point out to you all that I was the Planning Commission last time when this matter of the new development on North Jackson Street came up, and there will be a presentation at our board meeting next Monday night about that. A lot of the issues that she has addressed here, or raised at least, will be addressed there. It's going to be financed by a tax incentive financing program like we did Publix and the shopping center out there. They've got a plan to create tax incentive that will help develop our school system, for instance. They have agreed to provide a fire station site for us, or to acquire one for us. So this developer appears to be very responsible and appears to be somebody that's going to work with us to meet our concerns. One of the things they did do was they removed an exit from that development onto Ledford Mill Road, because so many people in that area were concerned about the increase in traffic on Ledford Mill Road. So I think they're going to work with us. Now, bear in mind that there are vacant lots in subdivisions that have been approved in Tullahoma for years that are still available for building. They're right, even in Macon Manor, there's some. And there's some along Avoca Road and places like that. So we're not going to have 990 units in 10 years here. It might be good if we did, but I don't think we will. But I think we need to look at the moratorium, not because I'm opposed to it, but look at it in light of all the information we can gather so that we can make a measured decision about what we want to do about that. That's all.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that TIF financing? What is that? And how do they get that? So the finance is that, so you called it tax.
The TIF, they call it
tax
TIF.
Incentivization, or tax increment fund.
Well, I'll try. It's a long time ago when I got my degree in economics in UT, Miss Almacher, but I'll try to what I think it is. The tax revenue generated from the project will be used to reduce the debt, because the people will borrow the money to build a project. But there will be money set aside for the school system as well to help us alleviate the cost, the increased impact on our school system. And they're going to provide for that. There will be an expert down here to explain all that to us next Monday night. I'm not he, but I did hear it, and Mr. Hall will probably realize this, that the explanation was too complicated for me to understand. But so I've told Mr. Brooks, let's make sure that when he comes, he really explains it so ordinary people can understand.
It requires some contractual agreements between the city
It does indeed, yes, it does indeed. But these are wonderful programs, and they really pay for themselves. And so I think that they anticipate the growth and anticipate how to help the city alleviate those problems. And one of the things that somebody brought up about the tax base here is, it's true that, our property taxes are very high because we don't have enough development now to raise the revenue we need in order to lower the property tax on those who are now here. So let's not rush to the moratorium, but it's something to consider, obviously, to make sure we have measured growth in the future.
The TIF is basically, short. They look at the possible tax revenue over a period of time and say, okay, it's got to be approved by us, it's got to be approved by the county, and a certain percentage of that you get on the front end to cover. So that will help cover infrastructure costs like roads. Now, and that's based off, and some of that's in, actually, this talks about the TIF and explains what it is and the but-fors. There are some but-fors. The assumption is that area wouldn't be economically developed over that period of time. And so, but it does, the stuff that we talked about with the PUD, they've estimated what all the economics on that. There's a ton of data that they're going to give us that hopefully we're going to sum down a little bit that talks about tax revenues over the next 20 years, what the TIF is going to be used for, and all those different pieces. So that question for that one is answered. And I think that, how many homes we had last year? You said in the report.
39.
39 homes built last year.
Well, so far this year.
Well, last year, wasn't it like 20-something?
I think it was 27, 26.
26 homes built last year, but there were 200 or so approved. And so what that tells us is it's market-based. These builders aren't going out and buying 1,000 lots and just building 1,000 homes. They're building it based off of can the market withstand it? And something that and we obviously can't, right? We can't sustain it. And even this one here, 900 homes, it's going to take a period of 15 plus years to do that. Because it's just...
So this says something about a TIF ordinance. So we have to pass that?
It's an ordinance, yeah. So they're bound by...
City and the county.
So we had a TIF ordinance back when Publix came in?
Yes, we did.
You're somewhere else right now.
No, I'm just curious. I didn't know any. Those are new words to me, so I'm always up for learning something new.
Well, it's real interesting. It's real complicated, but these financial people have worked it all out, and it works really, really well. It certainly has on for Publix as well. Yeah.
I'm not anti-growth. Let me just put that out there again. Clearly, I'm a realtor, and I would love for more houses to come into town. I just don't want to, and if the TIF is our saving grace, I think that's great. As long as we know that on the cut and dry on the front end. I just don't want to turn around with all the potential new development coming our way and then do a disservice to our residents, our existing residents that may not be able to afford their homes if their taxes go up by the county and the city.
Let me say this, the only way that our citizens' taxes will go up is if we have a moratorium on future development. And all of the existing taxpayers have to increase what they're paying for. So we have to have growth and increase the tax base. That's the way to grow. Not increase taxes, but to increase the tax base. And we'll do this if we do a moratorium, we stop that. And you scare away developers that could be contributing to the growth in our city. So we've talked about moratorium, but we've not talked about just what do we mean by a moratorium. We could have a moratorium on any future subdivisions. We could have a future subdivisions on any future preliminary plat approval. We could have a moratorium on the final plat approval. We could even have a moratorium on any new building permit. So So we do not want to do that to stifle. We've got a very modest growth, and we'll continue to have a modest growth based on the economy. So it'd be my plea for us to increase the tax base and not the tax rate. We made some comments about worrying about doubling the taxes, doubling property taxes. That is not even, that's a bad story, because that's not in the future. You talk about 2 fire stations instead of 1. We've never talked about 2 fire stations. Yes, Ms. Cheney.
Yes, my concern is that the development would take place, for instance, out where the PUD is supposed to be located, and all the existing neighborhoods and parts of town would be neglected because of all the energy that has to go out there to take care of all that getting built. I just see a lot of need around the city and of things that need to be done versus building a bunch of new stuff somewhere.
If I could chime in, I kind of go back to, I agree with you, but we've got to have the money in order to do that. And part of our challenges right now is because our property tax base has not increased, the cost of services to our city does keep increasing. Just look at fuel alone for all of our service vehicles. So my hope is if we were to follow through with this PUD, that also energizes the rest of the city to start seeing that there's opportunities for us to grow. But I go back to what, Alderman Wilson's, I fully agree with you. We've got to grow strategically. We've got to do it in a way that we don't oversaturate the market and then all of a sudden, we have retail leaving and whatnot. But we need to do something because we're at a crux right now where our sales tax revenue is not strong enough to continue us providing the level of services we have based on where we are right now. And so I go back to what Mayor Noah says, if we can increase our property tax base, then sales tax increases will come from that too. It's just as far as the volume should help with that.
Okay, what about page 161, growth capping laws? So if we don't do a moratorium, then I think there is take it down a notch alternative with these growth capping laws. So once we determine and define how we are measuring growth, whether it be by a calculation with the number of people and the number of homes being built or whatnot, however we're going to define this growth, it says that these growth capping laws are designed to limit but not to halt development pending the upgrading of capital improvements in the community. And so I would be interested in these growth capping decisions and the ways that they have been implemented successfully and constitutionally, because if you go down and read a little bit further, there have been lawsuits over these. And if there's a way to do that, to maybe balance the interests of those in favor of a more progressive approach right now, considering our tax-based needs, and those worried about our current infrastructure, I think that this might be a suitable meet in the middle.
And it's going to upset some people when I say this. So my thought in what we had kind of talked about is when currently you've got the plat, preliminary plat and those pieces in. But I think what I've kicked around is along with that, you need to provide a fiscal impact assessment. And that fiscal impact assessment says, does it pay for the infrastructure? If not, then what's it going to take to pay for the infrastructure? Is it going to increase police? Is it going to increase fire? So on a per development basis, and that, my idea is it doesn't just go to the planning commission. We have the pocketbook, right? So we've got to pay for everybody else's decisions. So the thought is that it does, if it meets a certain threshold, right, that fiscal impact assessment comes to us, and then we are able to say, this does not make economic sense. We cannot afford to do this. Before you can do this, similar to what this growth capping is saying, but instead of having a broad blanket, it's on a per basis, but we have numbers. I agree, we need to increase our tax base, but I agree with you as well in that not every increase in our tax base is a good increase in the tax base, right?
Right.
So having that fiscal impact assessment lets us,
Who brings that?
the
Who?
developer.
Well, there's the problem. So the problem I see with that is data can be manipulated
Well,
in
we have
order
a finance
to,
department that goes through and takes a look at those pieces, and our fire weighs in a little bit more than they, and I know that people aren't going to like this, developers aren't going to like that, but it's being used in cities all over, and it's a tool that lets us actually, yes, data can be manipulated, but that's why we have a finance department, and that's something that we talked about, that hopefully they're looking at in a little bit. It was kind of scared people at first when I threw it out there. But I think we found a happy medium to present something back in the coming months so that we can actually make, in my world, before I make any decision, I know approximately what it's going to cost me, staff-wise, everything-wise, before I say, yep, let's do this. And we should be doing that here.
Yeah, that's what I've been saying all along, and I think is what you're saying is, and put it in simple things, we could add development, and we add development, and that increases our tax base, and that gives us more money to operate on, and then all of a sudden you add one more development, and you've got to build a new school, you got to build a new fire hall, you've got to staff them, and then all of a sudden you're back to worse than you were. So that's why it's so important. Yeah, you have to balance it, and that's why we need that fiscal.
Okay, we've now evolved into the next session, impact fees.
Well, that's slightly different. So I say fiscal impact analysis, that's not the same as an impact fee.
Well, that's the way you get to an impact fee.
Semi, yeah. But it's kind of on the moratorium. I think it's a big tool, unless there's a good pitch, right? And exactly what we're going to do. But I think that there's better ways to, but it takes us acting and getting these things done. There are better ways to take control. Because I think, to your point and to some others' points, there's a lot of these decisions that are taken out of our control. But we end up having to pay the bills on this.
Citizens do.
We end up having to decide where, and ultimately, it's us that have to say, you know what, somebody else made this decision, and we're going to have to increase your taxes because of it. And so there needs to be that, there needs to be something where we can interject it, but you also don't want to make it political. And so that's where you need to head, not saying we are, but who knows who comes after us, right? And that's where you put in tools that we can say, here's an objective way to assess whether this is smart for the city or not smart for the city.
Right. And
Commissioner Comer, you're recognized.
Let me say one more thing before we leave this subject and go to Mr. Comer after that. We've all talked about it solely in dollars and cents, and that's a smart thing. We've really got to consider that. But then also, we've got to figure out the quality of life issue of all these other developments. How, and ask ourselves as we go forward in this is, how does this new development improve the quality of life for the people that are already living in Tullahoma? Is it going to be a positive impact on the quality of life, or is it going to be a negative impact? It could be either way, but that is another thing, non-financial, that I think needs to be considered when we look at this, because that, for everybody that lives here now, we've got to consider them and not just the future growth.
Commissioner Comer.
I have one comment, if I could.
Mr. Comer, you're recognized.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to say a little bit more about tax increment financing before we leave this subject. when tax increment financing was first started, I think it was in California quite a few years ago, the basic idea behind it is if you can finance the development of a host tenant into a shopping center, like, for example, in our case, in this particular case, it was a Publix, and we talked about Publix a while ago as being the real object of this tax financing. It was just that the Publix was the stimulus for the whole thing. The whole idea is if you bring that one in, others are going to come in because of that one being there. For example, if we didn't have, back before we had a Lowe's, if you bring in a Lowe's, what are all the other businesses that are going to build up around it because that Lowe's is here? So the tax increment you're talking about is defined as that what you have the current level projected in the future without any tax increases, just say it's going to be flat for 15 years or whatever the term of the finance is. Then you get all these others coming in, and you get the tax benefit of the host tenant coming in, plus you get all the growth of these others. Now look what happened out there with the Publix thing. They not only took that finance money and built the site out there for Publix, they greatly improved that entire shopping complex out there. And they put in a connection between the two that were there that were not connected before. And as a result, I know we got Marshalls, we got Old Navy, we got Hobby Lobby, and there may be some others that I don't think about. So that has absolutely worked. And it will work on the PUD as well, because there are going to be other companies, businesses that are going to build up along 41A there on the north side to facilitate and service that PUD community. There's going to be part of it is going to be internal with that retail area that they're going to put inside there. But in addition to that, there are going to be service stations, there are going to be all kinds of other businesses that are going to build up along there to take advantage of those people moving in there. And that's your tax increment that you get, not just the taxes that you're going to get off those houses being built, but the rest of the development, like the increase we got off the Marshalls and the Old Navy and the Hobby Lobby and all of that, by improving the layout of that whole facility there. The two that were separate, and we joined them into basically one with connection internal. And we moved some other things there to better facilitate that. And it worked out great.
So the tax increment financing is essentially financing by the city?
Well, what you do is you take that tax base that's going to be coming in and you finance it up front. So you take that money that you're going to get in the future and bring it up front.
Right. So
you're financing it over, in this case, I think.
You're getting a loan from the city, though?
No. The developer gets the loan.
I understand.
Finances with the taxes.
Finances with the taxes.
They'll explain this all in much more detail next week. Mr. Comer and I heard.
So what's the ordinance that you passed? So if you're getting a TIF financing, obviously has to be financing. Where's the money coming from? You don't get TIF financing from the bank, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, it does.
You get TIF financing from...
The payments come from the future tax increment.
Right.
Increments, so whether it's with the city or with the county or...
And then with the revenue that they get from the development, that they build and all that, yeah.
It's a secured loan, essentially, with the future tax base, but
That's
you're
correct.
getting the loan from the city or the county, whoever, that is going to receive the increase.
We're kind of a vehicle for that. We're not necessarily getting the loan. I'm not competent to explain this. They're going to bring somebody that can explain all the details to you next week. I only brought this up because I thought that information would be helpful to us in discussing the moratorium issue. You'll get a full explanation of all those things next week, but I just wanted to let you know that there's more information coming to you and that impressed me with my limited knowledge. But I did want to make one comment, and I don't know where it came from, but this does make sense to me. Somebody said, businesses follow houses. We have lost Crystal this year. We lost Bojangles last year. We lost Pennsylvania Station this year. We lost Jimmy John's last year. 4 businesses that came here and settled here, and they're gone already. Now, if that doesn't tell you that this town is on the verge of decline, I don't know what does. And it concerns me because I have 3 grandchildren that I'm helping to educate that I hope will come back here and live. And I'd like for them to have a place to live and a place to work. And a lot of us do. And we're not going to, this city is never going to stay like it is. Change is inevitable. Our job, your job, as the people that we've elected, is to channel that change in responsible ways. It's going to change. There's nothing we can do to keep them changing. We sure don't want to go downhill. And I've seen some towns decline. You remember when Normandy actually had 4 or 5 stores and there was some activity down there? Go down to Normandy now and see what's there. Nothing.
Steve, the decline in the industry is even worse than what it is in retail in Tullahoma. You look at the things that we've lost industry-wise in the last 10 years, and it's been very significant.
And just to add to what Mr. Worsham says, I think, taking that increased tax revenue, and what are we going to do with it? And I go back to what Alderman Glick said, which was quality of life, is that's how you invest in quality of life for current residents, is by taking that tax money and wisely using that to make sure all the population is able to benefit from it, not just your incoming new residents.
Ms. Cheney, you're recognized.
Thank you. I've spent a lot of time in the veteran communities of Chicago this summer, and one of the things that I can see happening on Jackson Street is like up there. It is just store after store after store after store, and traffic light after traffic light after traffic light, and there's very poor quality of life there. If it weren't for some churches and some schools spread around, it's just not what the people that live in this area want. That's not what they want for their life.
It was alluded during our budget sessions that, we kind of stuck by this year. But in our current state, we may not be as lucky next year, that we may have to look at figuring out whether that's taxes or some other way, and that's based off of how things are now, and that we're not going to be able to, our tax, sales tax revenue, which we're living off of, which is that is an extremely dangerous game, has been averaging, 8 to 12%. This last quarter was 0.4%. And so when you're living off of that and it goes away, and of course it's dangerous because of the economy ebbs and flows like that, but how it sits right now, today, we've already been told during our budget sessions that if something doesn't change, and that's not saying let's just go build. I don't believe we just increase. That's part of it. Increase the tax base is part of it. But if we don't change, then that is the answer, is yes, taxes are going to go up if we just continue down the same road. And so that's on us to figure out whether it's development or retail, or he said something, retail chases houses, and they do. And then when you look at something that always kind of worries me long-term, what's made Tullahoma attractive is, one, our location, right? And then in Manchester, they've got the interstate and stuff up there, but every time something tries to go along the interstate, they have this sewage problem. And so that's always turned stuff down, and businesses have come here to Tullahoma instead because of the micropolitan size. But as the state closed that deal on the May site this month, next month, that's going to happen in the next 5-6 years. And as part of that, sewage is coming along 24. Houses are coming to Manchester, and that is something that we do have to think about because retail does follow houses. And so as you add sewage along 24 and that becomes more attractive, you're going to look at, do I want an Old Navy in Tullahoma that's got 120,000 reach, or do I want to stick that Old Navy on 24 that's got $1.5 million in the same month time span that Tullahoma does? Now that's kind of dramatic, but it could put a stop to our advantage. We are losing that advantage. And so making the right investments, not just, because that might have been Jenna that said, we have limited space, right? So we're never gonna become Murfreesboro, or it's just not, physics doesn't allow that. But we could either grow ourselves out, like she said, or we could just stop, period. And then Manchester, Winchester, and Shell. And if that's what we want as a community, that's fine. I'm okay with if that's what the community wants, then that's what we do. But we just need to know those.
One comment to the mayor's point. Moratoria it's a heavy-handed resource. It's available. Tax increment financing, as Steve said, business follows housing. The connections are obvious. I think Charles pieced this together perfectly to help us see the tools that are and the resources that are available to build a bridge to a beginning of a future in an orderly way. What this says, one side of it says that revenue projections essentially are set aside in a special account, and the developers, based on your due diligence or the city's feeding you information that constitutes due diligence on necessary infrastructure, the due diligence beyond your information of funding for whichever is the most critical component. Right now, we're talking about sidewalks along Cedar Lane because there was some emergency federal money available. But what I've listened to for 24 months or so at your meetings is citizens talking about a 58-foot wide river in their front yard when it rains hard, and children walking, slogging through culverts to get to school because there's no safer place for them to traverse to get to school. And so above-ground stormwater management systems are tricky, but this suggests that it's a pretty rosy picture.
Yeah, but it's not. So, going back, let's just talk about the public. So, the TIF financing in that, this is just an example, the TIF financing in that respect would have been gone to, I don't know, maybe put in the infrastructure there with the lights or the development there. This that I've just read, because I'm already thinking in my head, how does this work? So TIF is a public financing method that is used as a subsidy for redevelopment, infrastructure, and other community improvement projects. The original intent of a TIF is to stimulate private investment in a blighted area that has been designated to be in need of economic revitalization. So through the use of a TIF, municipalities typically divert future property tax revenue increases from a defined area or a district toward an economic development project or public improvement project in the community. TIF subsidies are not appropriated directly from a city's budget, but the city incurs a loss through foregone tax revenue. The unintended consequences are that TIF districts have attracted much criticism, and some question whether TIF districts actually serve their resident populations. And it says that the TIF process arguably leads to favoritism for politically connected developers, implementing attorneys, economic development officials, and others involved in the process. And in some cases, school districts within these communities are experiencing a larger decrease in aid that would have otherwise gone to them, because you are essentially foregoing your future tax revenue increases and going ahead and spending that ahead of time. So there's a double-edged sword to this, and I want to say that it may be appropriate and it may be a good thing, but that's why I said this requires, I think you can paint the rosy picture any which way you want to. I think you have to be very careful with such.
I want to state that I, as an attorney, am not involved in this at all. I'm just making my statements, to help you all.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not saying you are. I was just reading that.
And that's probably true.
Yeah.
But there are two sides to every issue. We're not dealing with the blighted area. We're dealing with a vacant farm. Is producing very little revenue now and requires no infrastructure to be there. And a development that will produce a lot of revenue and arguably more revenue that it's going to cost us by far to service all that. So I'm just saying that there's two sides of the story. And I'm not disagreeing with that, but I think that the function of a TIF also involves more positive things than that particular.
Just remember, we're foregoing future tax revenue in order to do something now.
But we don't have that development now. We're foregoing tax revenue on that development that doesn't exist. We'll never get it if they don't develop it.
Sure. I think we have to weigh it.
And Charles, in his infinite wisdom, included this in our packet, this very thing. And so it does talk foregoing that's the but-for test that it talks about in here, right? Will we not have gotten that revenue but for this development coming in? Right now, when you looked at, okay, are we going to forego, how much is that piece of property giving us the tax revenue? It's just that property tax on the farmland there. I think it's just farmland, right?
Yeah.
So $3,000-4,000 a year. Are we willing to forego that let's call it $6,000 a year. Let's call it $10,000 a year. Are we willing to forego that $10,000 a year for the projected, what was it, $40-50 million over a 20-year period of time? Yeah. In that case, that makes sense. Where it might not make sense is if you are, say they wanted to do it, probably not a great example, say they wanted to do another TIF at the mall area, would it make sense for us to forego?
Right.
No, that wouldn't make sense for us to forego. Probably not, right? But that area is already generating, where we're talking about next week. It's not generating. There's nothing to forego. So, but he included all of that. All that's in here. It's a pretty good explanation.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a decision that we have exhausted our thoughts about the moratorium. And I'm going to declare a 5-minute recess, and we'll adjourn at, let's just adjourn about 5 to 7 or so. Okay?
Yeah, I'm not a huge wing fan. So, but I cook wings all the time. So I love
You
to
have
cook them.
no idea.
And I like doing the rubs and all that, and I'll give them to my mom or
Started discussing.
whoever's nearby. I'll make you, next time I do some wings, I'll let you know. I'll bring you some, because
We pay them back to the check every year.
right here, I'll drop off your house. But there, I got the wings down. You got all that down. I still
Stand up, let them know it's
It gets cold at about 7 o'clock. They got a program, they all deny that it's a program thermostat, but I don't believe
There's definitely, we can do that.
it's always cold. Have you noticed that?
It is, but I always picture purgatory warmer, so welcome to.
shared this.
He's been trying.
Well, I'll tell you about purgatory sometime. That's a different tale. Yeah.
He's grabbed that microphone about 5 or 6 times.
Something I said. They got me in trouble.
Yeah, but,
This shouldn't take long, impact fees.
Somebody was logged in there.
I hope. I won't say it, I promise I won't say a word. I don't care about impact fees, that's up to y'all.
I don't think y'all understand why. I can share it now, it's public record.
Well, yeah, I've been over it for about a week now. Not too bad, no, it's just bad color tax.
That's good.
You could just, you'll get the highlights.
You know, you worry though, especially at my age, about whether it's going to be good
What do we have about impact fees here?
Yeah, I was glad to see that.
It shouldn't take long to find out somebody's I looked right at
While we're still on intermission, may I just offer the final piece of my comment was, let's try in our due diligence examinations to ensure we include the law of unintended consequences.
Preach.
It's always going to be, quite a bit more than we expect.
Yeah.
We'll be back in session. And at this time, we're going to move to the final topic of the evening. That's impact fees. Hot subject in our state right now, not just in our city, but in the state as well. So that'll turn it over to Director Rush.
Thank you, Mayor. Staff was directed by the Planning Commission on August 21st to schedule a study session with BOMA regarding impact fees. Impact fees were also mentioned during the August 28th of BOMA while discussing a moratorium study. I want to bring it to your attention that Tennessee Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations have actually taken up the study on affordable housing and impact fees. The joint resolution passed the House. No action has been taken by the Senate yet, but the study is actually due in December. It's attachment 3.8 on page 302. The purpose, the study, the factors affecting housing affordability in Tennessee, including such policies as impact and development taxes. This is nothing to do with HUD or assisted living. This is just affordable housing in actually Tennessee, along with their effects on developers and other real estate professionals, infrastructures, and development, perspectives, and current residents, the availability of affordable housing and local government findings, and assess potential policies for equitable addressing the changes of growth. Background. Housing affordability is an issue that has received increased public attention, with new construction lagging population growth and demand in much of the country. Fannie Mae estimates that within The 75% largest metro areas in the U.S. alone, there's a shortage of 4.4 billion homes. Meanwhile, data from the Federal Reserve shows that the median cost of housing has outpaced the growth in the cost of other goods, having doubled within just the last 20 years. Additionally, the measurements from the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies, 25.5% of Tennessee households, whether owners or renters, were cost burdened by housing as of 2020, paying more than 30% of their income to meet their housing needs. And of those, roughly half spent more than 50%. 10 counties and 16 cities in Tennessee levy a development tax or an impact fee. That was authorized by private act before 2006. On June 20, 2006, the County Powers Relief Act preempted any future private acts authorizing a local development tax or authorizing a county to enact an impact fee on real estate transfer tax. Cities incorporated under the general laws of Mayor Aldermen Charter or the general law modified city manager council charters are authorized to levy impact fees. The City of Tullahoma is authorized to levy impact fees. The County Powers Relief Act has authorized the 39 county governments with either 20% increase in population between the two most recent census or a 9% increase in population over the most recent 4 years of census estimates to enact an adequate facilities tax to fund educational facilities. Of 39 counties that are authorized by the County Powers Relief Act to levy an adequate facilities tax for, Bedford, Jefferson, London, and Trousdale have done so. In its 2006 staff report, Growing Pains, Financial Challenges of Local Governments, TACIR recommended that the General Assembly enact general enabling adequate facilities tax, impact fees, and real estate transfer tax legislation, but the recommendations have not been adopted. In recent years, there have been attempts to extend impact fees or development taxes to other communities, including Senate Bill 1840 by Hensley and House Bill 1675 by Sepecki in 2022, which would have enabled Monroe County to levy impact fees. The bill did not pass. In 2023, the same sponsors introduced Senate Bill 25 and House Bill 12, which have increased the initial development rate allowed under the County Powers Relief Act $1 to $3 while maintaining the curbs of how quickly that rate might be raised in later years. The bill was withdrawn in the House. In 2023, Representative Sparks filed House Joint Resolution 139 requesting a study from the TACIR on housing affordability and impact fees. When the resolution came up for initial discussion for the House Property and Planning Subcommittee, a large contingent of realtors and property developers from Rutherford County was presented with one of them, Hunter McDowell, giving testimony. He cited the average cost of new construction in his county as being over $495,000 and linked this to the county's school facilities tax of $1 per square foot on new construction, with Smyrna's impact fee of $3,000. He said that government fees constitute 25% of costs of new living in Tennessee. Thus, HJR 139 is still actually in discussion and still being studied, and we'll actually have a full report in December. So just keep aware of that whenever you're talking or thinking about impact fees. And this has been a hot topic for many. Many have even said that they should outlaw impact fees. So this is actually going to be picked up by the Senate. Everyone's saying it pretty much is. So Tennessee, there's a good chance that they voted on this, and if we put up impact fees in 6 months, we develop all that, and then in a year, they could say that, no, we're not doing impact fees anymore. So just keep that, be aware of that, please.
Okay, but one comment. Today, impact fees in Tullahoma are legal.
Correct. You can pass impact fees.
But that's subject to change with the General Assembly in December.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay.
So you can pretty much have impact fees for anything that you want. You can have school impact fees. You can have police impact fees. You can have fire impact fees, you have impact fees are just building houses. It's actually just whatever you're determining. Just keep in mind, though, if you, let's just say, example of District 1, you're having a huge development going in District 1, and you're saying that you're going to have a school impact fee, District 1 schools get that impact fee. It has to be roughly proportional to the area it's going to be serving, right? So we're saying right now we're faced with the potential of it, 996 planned mixed-use development going in. The fire department has already indicated that they are in need of an additional station. So we can't put all that burden on that new development going in because there's already residents in that area. All right, I give my time back to the BOMA and PC.
Barry, you had a comment?
If the state does decide impact fees are not going to happen, if our ordinance is passed before that happens, then ours stay. Because they can't change something that's already, we just won't ever be able to change it.
Yes, they can.
Yes.
Yes, they can. Because they can't negate anything that's already happened and the impact fees that we've already collected, but they could prohibit us from collecting them in the future.
Yes.
So they can prohibit us from collecting it.
Yes, in the future.
So why can't, well, I'll have a discussion on that. Like the tourism stuff, they've said it has to go towards X. But we're grandfathered in, so they can't force us to do it.
Well, that's a different issue from this.
Separate. My quick thoughts on, I don't think that we should just arbitrarily do, this goes back to kind of what we talked about, is the fiscal assessment and Winchester Utilities is looking at this right now. TUA just kind of did it. Winchester Utilities, the route that they've taken, and I asked them today who they used, and I forgot the name, but they brought somebody in to an economist to look at, because what they wanted to be able to do was to justify every penny of that impact tax and not just blanketly throw. So that would kind of be my stance is, I'd say I'd like to look at it more, but I'd like to get, as part of getting an economist in here to look at those pieces and help them work with Charles to craft, I don't want to do an impact fee, just do an impact fee.
And I agree with you.
Sense.
Yeah, I think most definitely we should hire a consultant to actually develop that impact fee. And also the capital improvements program, you guys had a work session from June 19th, 2023, to actually go over some capital improvements. Of course, that was never really officially adopted, but continue to work on that. So there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done in regards to impact fees. And it's going to be costly. We are going to have to pay for it.
Of course, one of the things that became clear in reading this is that any impact fee that we consider has to be directly related to the project that is impacting us. And that it has to affect people in that set of, that subdivision, if you will, and not affect, you can't have people that are not in that subdivision paying for what's being provided to the people in a new subdivision. So it's kind of I noticed one thing of importance that was important to me, that I looked at the very end of this chapter that we're looking at right here and looked at the number of legal challenges that have been made regarding impact fees. And if there's one thing that became clear, this is a very litigious issue. There's been 144 cases cited in the material that you've given to us. So we're sort of opening ourselves to, our attorney might have to hire additional help.
I'm not excited about the prospect of that, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I think we have a land use lawyer that you instructed to hire, so that would greatly help with that, hopefully developing that and, working with those impact fees and with staff. So I think that would help.
I forgot about that.
Any further comments on the impact fees? Yes, sir.
In that case law section, sir, I don't know if I should use this. In that case law section on page 262 at the bottom, Keystone Bituminous Coal Association. The language that's incorporated into this decision says that essentially, that land use lawyer would love this, I think. The wide latitude that a municipal government has to phrase this in generous terms. You have a wide variety, in other words, of choices. And this points to takings in this case, but the language, it says, in order to facilitate the construction of roads, drainage, parks, public safety facilities, satisfying community needs and not making the property owner too unhappy, they can either pay money, build the improvements, or give the city property for various, like a fire station. If the value of these requirements was more than the impact fees that were due, the developer would receive credits that could be used to pay for future impact fees or sold to other developers, et cetera. In some cases, exchanged with the city for cash. And in this case, the credits expire after 7 years. A different case, they could give them an impact fee gift card. So it seems to me, again, the common sense test and logic would suggest that because we want development, we know we need it, we need more homes, it's proven throughout this document and throughout our lives. These businesses that are interested in and have come before you and made their pitch, I think would be receptive to that kind of flexibility. That's what struck me as I read this once Charles sent it. I thought, well, good. I mean, an impact fee, it sounds negative and painful for somebody. It doesn't have to be negative and painful inequitably. We can all feel a little bit and still get the job done. So that's what they did.
I think impact fees have a place. I think they prevent a negative impact to existing property owners who are not related to a development and are going to derive no benefit from that development. So why should they pay for that development? So that's where an impact fee, I think, could be advantageous. I don't know that in Tullahoma today, we're in a position to incorporate impact fees until we get the data that you've been pushing for and talking about. So I think we'll defer further conversation on impact fees until we get that data. With that, meeting is adjourned.